I guess the first question to get out of the way, do you think your documentary will crack the wall that Trump supporters have set up where all information against Trump is fake or emotionally charged and thereby not to be trusted even though it's the truth?
I don't know whose hearts and minds the media changes these days.
Mm,
The role that my film could, the dent that my film could make is yet to be seen. We're the eighth most popular. It's our first day dropped on Amazon and Apple. I just got a notice that we were the eighth most popular documentary on Apple. But what does that actually mean?
right.
Uh, we're probably, it's not guaranteed yet. We're probably going to air on public television early next year, nationally. At least we think. Um, you know, can we penetrate or break through people's minds to let them know they're being manipulated? I hope so. I think the important thing is that people make their own films and they make follow up on this, and that you get a competing media narrative than the lies that everyone is being told right now, because people are being manipulated. And that's what our film sets out to explain. Yeah.
Where you began to organize the roots of misinformation designed to generate the white fear, what was the starting point and why do you think it emerged when it did?
Well, I think it emerged when it did, in part by accident. The Nixon administration is really the first administration to formalize racial manipulation as electoral policy.
Hmm.
He brings these guys on, and they really think about how can we divide the country along race. Now, this had been done before, but it had never been done so scientifically. And I think that they learned it from Barry Goldwater, because Barry Goldwater had run 4 years prior, and he had used a kind of racial dog whistling, although it wasn't always dog whistling. He said things like minorities run this country. That's not exactly a dog whistle. But Goldwater was able to flip 7 states to his political party by using this racial fear mongering.
uh,
I think people saw his success, that he flipped 7 southern states, and that became really the understanding. Yes, if appealed to on racial grounds, people will do so much as to change their political party. And so Nixon's people recognized that, and he leaned into it.
there were more people of color and astoundingly women who thought Trump was a better choice for them in 2024 when his record proves the opposite. What is the basis for that support in your observation, and why do women fear voting for someone of their own gender?
Well, I can't speak for why women make decisions. I that would be I'd have to dig into some research and
Right,
see what those conclusions were. But not being a woman, I'm married to one, and I
right.
have an 8-year-old daughter. I can guess, but I think that would be dangerous. The the uh, the fact of the matter is that Trump's fear mongering, his biggest fear mongering in the last election, right, the one we had just in 2020, the one that he just took. My dates are all screwed up. He
Yeah,
just took office 100 and whatever days ago.
right, right.
The election that Trump just won. His biggest issue was immigration, and I don't. I think that he had spent a lot of time talking about Black lives before,
Right.
and but that was not central to his campaign now. And so you saw a massive rise in Black voters, particularly the biggest rise was among Black men. But what was interesting that while he was, decrying immigration, you also saw a rise in Hispanic voters. And that I think is due to the fact that a lot of Hispanic voters in this country don't necessarily want more of them to come.
Right.
They believe all voters, white or non-white, believe that what the Trump administration says, that they're coming for your jobs, that they're going to come here and commit crimes, and what have you. The data shows that, especially violent crimes in particular, but crimes are committed more by people born here than they are
Yeah.
by immigrants. But that fear remains. And so, if you can scare anybody who lives in this country that immigrants are coming for your jobs and coming for your families, they're going to get scared and they're going to vote for Trump. The other part of it is that, a lot of Hispanic voters in this country come from countries that are generally unsympathetic to the left, and that would be Venezuela and Cuba, which had far left leaning in ideology, far left leaning leaders. And so you're not going to find a Cuban that's ever going to vote Democrat. Let me rephrase that. There are some Cubans who will never vote Democrat because they see them as associated with the left. I can't speak for all Cubans. I'm just going off of reporting.
Right. Yeah.
So you have an automatic win from certain people in the Cuban and Venezuelan community, and of course, the rest of them are concerned about immigration as a whole. Had Trump focused on Black Lives Matter, you might not have seen as much of a climb in black voters as you did. But of course, he won on all increases in virtually all demographics. He won that election, soundly against an African American woman who he made all sorts of allegations about. They just didn't, not as many of them were as overtly focused on her being black.
Interesting. Many historians point toward Reconstruction as the last opportunity to squelch white supremacy, even as all leaders were male and white. Why, in your observation, did the North, who won the war, allow the South, who lost, to regain their economic power through the very forces that caused the Civil War?
After the Civil War, and a lot of people don't know this, there was a sort of general commitment, particularly by Northerners, but also by some Southerners, to put right some of the wrongs of the past and elevate, Black Americans into some positions of authority, of power, political power, business power, and what have you. And for a whole bunch of reasons that go beyond my historical scope, after a few years of that, basically white Americans in power decided we don't want any of that, and they undid it all, almost with a cruel level of cruelty unseen since slavery.
Yeah.
And 100 years of progress that was made in 1 to 2 to 5 years was undone in a matter of days.
Yeah.
This is an ugly chapter in American history, because could you imagine the progress we would have had in racial relations if we'd embraced those ideas?
Yeah.
I don't know all the ins and outs as to why it was done, but I think we also need to point out that it isn't surprising. White Americans, when they see their positions of power threatened, respond, and they respond aggressively and swiftly, and often quite with a large, significant amount of cruelty. And that's what you saw, after the end of slavery happens, and we've never really recovered from that.
Everybody wants for themselves and their children to be safe, but safety is never guaranteed. Besides the propaganda, what other factors do you find for irrational white fear in our current society?
Well, first of all, we're told as part of this white fear industrial complex, which is really what we have now in the United States, told that we as white Americans are not safe from Black Americans, that we're not safe from because Black Americans commit crime. We're told that Hispanic Americans also commit crime and that they're going to take our jobs. We're told that Muslim Americans threaten our security and safety with things like terrorism. We were told that Chinese Americans were somehow, it was implied that they were somehow complicit in bringing COVID here. Yeah. And yet we know that none of these things are the data doesn't support these things, right? There's some evidence maybe that more crimes have been committed by African Americans based on neighborhoods and what have you. If you break that down by income, though, and region, a lot of that starts to fall apart. And so what we are basically being told by the white power structure is that we have a lot to be afraid of. Now, even though the data, as I mentioned, shows that we don't. What we end up getting, though, in result, are white Americans who take it upon themselves to go kill people. So, in other words, this notion that this whole effort is going to protect us from physical danger isn't protecting us from physical danger, but it is actually causing physical danger. How do we know that? Let's take a look at these mass murders that have happened in the last few years. The guy who shoots up the Jews in the synagogue in Pittsburgh, or who shoots up the synagogue in California, he's killing white Americans. So white people are getting killed by another white person. Right. Okay. That white person says, though, this is a very interesting thing. He says, I'm killing these Jews in Pittsburgh because these Jews are letting in immigrants from the South over the border. It's a very strange connection. Why does he believe that immigrants are coming over the border that are a danger to him? He believes this because he's being told this by the white fear industrial complex. And so all these mass murders, the one at Tops Grocery And I want to look up all my facts about each one before I get them all. They get a little jumbled in my head if I put
Yes.
them all
Yeah.
at once. But all of these are based on racial manipulation and fear mongering that is put forth by Republican politics and the white fear media machine. Rush Limbaugh, Fox News,
Yeah.
Newsmax, and others. I mean, I can't point to anyone and say your group causes violence. That would be irresponsible. What I can say is that collectively, it's creating an ideology that is now leading to physical harm, violent physical harm.
Thank you, Andrew. So there is approximately 7,480 miles of border in the U.S., not including the coastline. So barring a police state, that protection doesn't seem doable. What does white fear believe that Trump's "only I can do it" proclamation is better than any legal means of creating a better situation?
Look, I'm not an expert on border security.
Okay.
I think that it's a testament to America that so many people want to move here. If you go to any country, not any, but many countries, and look at the American embassy, there's a long line. I've been to 40 countries, and I see the embassy, when you drive by it, and you can see this long line of people that are applying for visas and citizenship, and they want to come here. And I think it's great that they want to come here. My understanding is that since Trump's been in office, those numbers are way, 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 way down.
Yeah.
But what we get with what this white fear mechanism is that we don't address a serious issue, borders, immigration. I think it's fair to say that under Biden, immigration was largely unchecked. Huge numbers of people came in, and that was very unsettling for a lot of Americans. Was it good to let those people in? I can't make that moral judgment. That's way beyond what I do. I don't make
Right.
moral judgments as a journalist anyway. I report
Right.
for the most part. But every journalist makes some, moral. It's impossible. We're not computers. But that being said, a very serious issue like borders is not really what they're interested in. What they're interested in is using this as a tool to win votes. At least that's what our research shows.
Sure.
And the other part of it is, like, you look at these roundups that they're doing right now, where they'll go into a city and send in ICE, and they'll surround a restaurant and get 8 people with 100 agents. That gets a lot of headlines. And so it really becomes more about drawing attention to the issue than solving the issue,
Yeah.
because they're not getting rid of the huge numbers of people, the undocumented, that are here. There'd be no way to do that anyway. I mean, then the millions of people here they'd have to ship out, and the dogs they'd have to bring out to round them up. I mean, it's a horrifying idea. It sounds like something Hitler would do.
Yeah. It is said that documentarians learn more about their subject more than even the documentaries themselves imply. What did you learn about yourself in the research of this documentary? And was it the most than any other doc you've done before?
I mean, I don't know what I learned about myself, except I certainly was surprised to learn just how manipulated Americans are. I always assumed, that politicians were racist out of convenience. I never understood just what a planned and sophisticated machine this was. I mean, it's really detailed. I didn't know that, guys like Kevin Phillips wrote books about it, about how to divide America and win over huge numbers of people. And that's really what we do and what we've been doing. And politicians have done it. And by the way, the left does its share of manipulation too. I just don't think it's leading to mass murder the way that the right is, and leading to the bigotry and divisiveness in our country.
Right.
That, I think, is where they are markedly different.
Okay. Final question. There is an industry, as we've talked about, of right-wing propaganda that is now legitimized with no equivalent on the left, although you've mentioned, except perhaps truth. But even that has been denied viability in our digital age. After studying this phenomena, what do you see as any options we have left?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the most dangerous thing, I think, is not the mainstream media. I mean, I was in a conversation with a former Fox News, a CNN reporter this morning, and he was pointing out in our conversation that Fox News, at its peak, at its biggest moment in time, might have 3 million viewers, 5 million viewers. And in America, there are 350 million people, something like that. So it's reaching, what, 1 in 70 people? And that's at its best, at its biggest. How many people right now are on TikTok or Facebook or YouTube? I mean, it's unbelievable how powerful the social media is. But it's not, people just use this phrase social media. They sort of toss it out there. But
Right.
I want to describe it. It's a information ecosystem where people exist. They go home, they look on their phone and they start swiping. They swipe their Facebook, their Instagram, their TikTok, and the computer is feeding them, especially if they get into swiping reels on something like TikTok, is
Right.
feeding them I call it your feed, but it's your collective feed. And that's where they get so much of their information. They do it when they go to the bathroom in the restaurant. They do it before they go to bed. They do it when they're sitting on the train, in the taxi cab, sitting as a passenger in a car. They do it in between phone calls at work. You're getting your feed 24/7. You're only watching the news or reading the newspaper in limited bursts. And so now our feed is beginning to shape whole ways of who we are. I hear people from various communities complaining about a certain bad thing that's happening to their community. Why isn't anybody doing anything about it? Because nobody's hearing about it. Nobody's learning about it. Right? I talked to my friends talking about what's going on in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine. If you are not tuned into that on your feed, you have no idea. You're oblivious.
Right.
Who watches the evening news anymore? That used to be what America sat down, the whole country sat down and watched two networks and later three at 6 o'clock for the evening news. I can't remember. I'm in the business, and I can't remember the last time I watched the evening news.
Right.
It's also, excuse me, a poorly produced, mainstream, non-opinionated, boring.
It's terrible.
You go to your feed, and there's people telling you what you want to hear. They're exciting you.
Right.
They're buzzing you, and so people are now very much a function of what they're reading and learning all day long. And they're shaped by that.
Yeah.
What if all day long it's telling you, buy Diet Coke, right?
Yeah.
I mean, my feed doesn't talk about Diet Coke. I had a conversation with Van Jones, great guy from CNN. He said to me, Andrew, my feed, this is his words, my feed knows I'm black and it keeps showing me videos about Diddy. What is your feed showing you? And I said, I don't have anything about Diddy on my feed. Your feed doesn't think that's interesting to you. And so we were talking about how we have two totally different ecosystems.
Yeah.
And that's where we live. And that shapes us now culturally.
This is Patrick McDonald for HollywoodChicago.com. Copyright 2025.